Dhul Hijjah, on a Friday, he gets up and he addresses the people. And he says, Ya ayyuhan nas, I saw a dream where a rooster came up to me and it pecked me twice. And then the people said to me that you should appoint a Khalifa. So Umar radiallahu anh, he interpreted the dream that his death is near. And he said, the Khalifa must be appointed by people who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with, and the Prophet ﷺ is pleased with them after I do pass away, because my death is near, my end is near. So 2 days passed, and on the 23rd of Dhul Hijjah, a companion by the name of Amir, he narrates that on that day, Umar radiallahu anh, he came to lead Fajr. And he says that he was standing 2 rows behind Sayyidina Umar, and between him and Sayyidina Umar was the companion Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anh. And he said that before prayer, Umar radiallahu anh, he would make sure that the rows are straightened and they got ready for prayer. And Umar radiallahu anh, he started salah and he led with Surah Yusuf in the first rak'ah. And he started weeping and he started crying, he started sobbing. While all of this was happening beforehand, Abu Lu'lu'ah had prepared a dagger that he poisoned on both ends. And he swore to kill Umar that morning. And he blended in with the Muslims. Again, it was dark, it was Fajr time. And you really can't see anything during that time. He blended in with the Muslims, and waiting, he did. And he was waiting for the opportunity to stab Sayyidina Umar and end his life. And so Sayyidina Umar, he went into the court, he got up, he went into sujood. Abu Lu'lu'ah, he then proceeded and he jumped and he stabbed Sayyidina Umar up to 9 times. From his sides, from his back, from his front. And the most painful and the most severe wound was in the stomach. And right when he got stabbed, Umar radiallahu anh, he gasped and he said, the dog has stabbed me, the dog has killed me. And he recited right away, وَكَانَ أَمْرُ اللَّهِ قَدَرًا مَقْدُورًا. He said, and Allah's command has been firmly decreed. Again, look at how he thinks. Look at his thought process right after being stabbed. So the Sahaba, some came to help Sayyidina Umar, and some were reaching to capture Abu Lu'lu'ah. And so Umar radiallahu anh, again, look at where his mind was. Look at what was on the top of his priority list. He grabs one of the Sahaba by the legs and he tells him, finish the prayer, finish the prayer. And he goes unconscious. And Abu Lu'lu'ah in the back, he went and he stabbed and he killed some people and he wounded a lot. And when he realized he was trapped and there was no way for him to go, he ended up stabbing himself and killing himself. And then the Muslims, they finished prayer. And they carried Sayyidina Umar to his son's house, Abdullah. And once Sayyidina Umar regained consciousness, the first thing he asked was, Asalla nas? Did the people pray? Was Fajr completed? Again, look at the way he thought. And they reassured him. They said, yes, ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. They prayed, don't worry. He said, okay, alhamdulillah. He said, get me water. So they all thought he needed to drink. So they got him water. And he started making wudu, because he didn't finish Fajr. And he finished Salatul Fajr. And then he started asking the questions. He said, who killed me? Who stabbed me? And they said it was Abu Lu'lu'ah. But then he stabbed himself. And then he died. And he said, alhamdulillah, it wasn't a Muslim who stabbed me. And then he said, you know, how did this transpire? What happened after? Right? And they said, Ya Umar, so and so happened, and then we carried you, and then now you're here. He said, alhamdulillah. And then they called a doctor. And Sayyidina Umar drank milk, and milk came out of his stomach because the wound was so severe. And the doctor, he consulted Umar, and he said, Ya Umar, you are going to die. There's no going back from this. So if you have a wasiyah, if you have a will, make it right now, Ya Umar. Make it right now. You're on your deathbed. And so the first thing he says, he calls his son Abdullah. And he tells him, go around the city and see whoever I owe money to and pay off my debts. And after that was completed, his son Umar came back. He said, okay, alhamdulillah. And now he appoints the council, a committee who will appoint the next Khalifa. Again, look at the way he's thinking, right? He appoints the last people who were promised Jannah. There were only 6 left at that time. And with them, he includes Sa'id ibn Zayd, who was his brother-in-law and his cousin. And Sa'id was fit enough to be a candidate for Khilafah. But Umar radiallahu anhu, he wanted to avoid nepotism. He didn't want his family to take over the Khilafah so that generation after generation that would happen. See, again, look at where his mind was. Look at where his priority was, right? And so he included them and he made the committee, and the committee was working on appointing the next Khalifa. Alhamdulillah, task number 2 done. And then he requested for a companion by the name of Hudhayfa bin al-Yaman, who had the list of the hypocrites that the Prophet ﷺ gave him. And he called him and he asked him, Ya Hudhayfa, is my name on that list? Did the Prophet ﷺ tell you that I'm a hypocrite? Please tell me. So then Hudhayfa, he started tearing up and he said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, you're asking something of me that I can't disclose. I can't give you this information. And he said, Billah alayk ya Hudhayfa, please, I need to know. Am I a munafiq? Did the Prophet ﷺ say that I'm from the munafiqeen? And then that's when Hudhayfa, he started sobbing. And he said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, I'll tell you and you only, wallahi, you weren't mentioned. And Umar radiallahu anhu said, Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah. And then he calls his son Abdullah and he tells him that he has one final wish. And he says to him, go to our beloved mother, Aisha radiallahu anha, and tell her that Umar sends his salam. He says, don't say Khalifa, because I'm not Khalifa anymore. I'm just Umar now. Tell her Umar sends his salam. And tell her that Umar has a request that you can deny. No problem, no pressure. And he says Umar's request is to be buried next to his 2 companions, Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam and Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu. And he said to him, don't pressure her and see what she says. If she allows it, alhamdulillah, it's her virtue. And if she says no, then that is just. Don't put any pressure on her. And so Abdullah, he goes and he knocks on the door of Aisha radiyallahu anha. And he says, you know, Salamu alayki ya ummi, Salamu alaykum, my beloved mother. And he says, Umar has this request. And Aisha was crying radiyallahu anha. She was weeping. And they said that she wept more and she cried more than when her own father died. And when they asked her why, she said, Umar was the door between us and fitna. And now that he's passing away, all this fitna will come. And so Abdullah, he asked her, he said, can Umar be buried next to his 2 companions? Can Umar be buried next to his 2 beloved companions? And she said, I always envisioned that 3rd grave to be my grave. But I know how deep Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he loved Umar. And so I'll grant him it. And Abdullah, he went back with the good news. And Umar radiallahu anh, he was relieved, he was happy. And shortly after, Umar radiallahu anh, he passes away. And subhanAllah, if we take 2 steps back, brothers and sisters, the last moments of Umar radiallahu anh's life truly brought what is inside of him outwards. And it brought out what his priorities were. And how his thought process was happening inside of his brain. And it showed everyone around him and everyone yet to come, i.e. us, what our priorities should be like, what our thought processes should be like. And inshallah, in the second part of the khutbah, we will go over some lessons. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم فيا فوز المستغفرين استغفروه. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد, brothers and sisters, from the story of Sayyidina Umar alone, the last moments of his life, we witnessed how dedicated Sayyidina Umar was to Islam and how dedicated he was to pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to fulfilling his obligations. And we saw his priority list unfold right in front of our eyes, right? The first, his top priorities were making sure that he, along with all the other Muslims, carry out the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with him. Right? We see this right after he got stabbed. What was the first thing he said? He commented, right? He acknowledged Allah's decree. Alhamdulillah, this is all written. And then he commanded the Sahaba to continue praying. He commanded the Sahaba to continue praying. And we see this again. After he gained consciousness, the first concern was, did the people complete their prayer or not? And then he proceeded to pray. And then we see this again when he goes and he asks his son to get Hudayfa and to see himself and to ask Hudayfa if he is on the list of hypocrites or not. Again, everything revolving towards the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything revolving around Allah. And the second is that he made sure he has fulfilled his obligation to the people. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he put him in a position of leadership. He put him in a position of leadership, and he wanted to make sure that obligation was fulfilled. He wanted to make sure he was a good leader. And we see this by seeing how he assigned a committee to pick the next Khalifa, right? He fulfilled his obligation as Khalifa by ensuring that the future of the Muslims was secured. And the third is we see his love for the Prophet ﷺ, right? He showed immense love, and he showed how truly he loved the Prophet more than he loved himself by wanting to be buried next to him and by asking Sitna Aisha to be buried next to him. Now, brothers and sisters, there are a lot of lessons we can unpack, but I want to focus on two and two only. The first is we have, as a collective group, we have to check and reorganize and tweak our priority lists from time to time if necessary. Right, in this day and age where everything is all over the place, where everyone is confused, we have to truly ask ourselves, where is Allah on our priority list? What matters to us the most? Right, a lot of us, we put Allah last and this dunya first. And some of us put Allah first and this dunya last. Where do we fall? Right, and it's very okay to forget sometimes, but we need to revisit this on a basis that is between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And we have to put Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first, especially during times like these. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, be mindful of Allah and you will find Him in front of you. Recognize and acknowledge Allah in times of ease and prosperity, and Allah will remember you in times of adversity. And he says, and know that what has passed you was not going to befall you, and what has befallen you was not going to pass by you at all. And he says, know that with victory, that victory comes with patience, and that relief comes with affliction, and that hardship comes with ease. So brothers and sisters, where is Allah in our lives? Right? Where is He on our priority list? Is He the center of everything that we do or not? The second lesson is to remember death often. My dear brothers and sisters. Our scholars, they say there are three types of people when death is mentioned. Three types of reactions. He said the first is a person who is extremely uncomfortable when death is mentioned, and he is scared of it, and he strives to change the subject right away. The second, they say, is a person who is scared when hearing about death, but he tries to better himself in preparation for it. Sure, death scares me, but I will work on myself. And they say the third is a person who is so eager to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he enjoys the conversations of death, and he can't wait to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And the question that automatically has to follow is, how do we prepare ourselves? As generic as it sounds, how do we prepare for our deaths? How do we prepare for our death? Imam al-Ghazali, he was asked this question, and he said, know that death is an expression used for the journey of this world to the divine presence, for to Allah is the ultimate return. Again, once death hits, it's not over. It's not the end of our journey. It's just the beginning of a very long one. And he says anyone traveling, he gives a nice little analogy. He says anyone traveling to a royal court is in need of three things for his journey. Three things for his journey. He says the first, a severing of the ties that keep him from advancing. The second, a preparation of provisions for the road. And the third, an acceptable gift for the king, to attain the king's pleasure. And he says similarly, the traveler journeying to the divine presence is in need of these three things as well. وَلِلَّهِ الْمَثَلُ الْأَعْلَى. Right? Anyone that is journeying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala needs these three essential things. He says there is no provision for the journey to the hereafter except with taqwa, with good deeds, and with avoiding sins. So you need to prepare your provisions, you need to prepare your food and water and everything that will keep you alive during this journey to the royal court by following what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told you to do and abstaining from what He told you not to do. And having taqwa in Him, right? And the second, he says, when it comes to the cutting of ties that keep you from advancing to your destination, he says the attachments that prevent one from journeying towards the hereafter are all connected to the love of this world and your attachment to it. So the more that you are attached to this world, the more that it'll bring you down, the more that it'll slow you down, right? So cut all the ties that prevent you from reaching your full potential, from allowing yourself to reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with, to obtain His pleasure. And he says the third is when it comes to the gift. Imam al-Ghazali, he says, the gift that a traveler to the hereafter should prepare is to present to the divine his faith, his iman in this world. And that brings about love for Allah through his ma'rifah. Right? This is the gift that we will give Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when we do meet Him. This is what our resumes to Allah will be, our faith and how we acted on it. We were Muslim, alhamdulillah. We believed, alhamdulillah. But what did we do with that faith? What did we do with that faith? How did we please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this dunya? How did we get closer to Him? How did we fulfill our obligations to Him? This is what we are going to be presenting Allah Jalla Jalaluh. My dear beloved brothers and sisters, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us all to have a good ending. May He make us of those who constantly remember death. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us of those who He is pleased with. اللهم اغفر لنا وارحمنا وعافنا واعف عنا وتجاوز عن سيئاتنا اللهم كن مع إخواننا المستضعفين في غزة اللهم كن معهم ولا تكن عليهم اللهم انصرهم ولا تنصر عليهم اللهم داوي جرحاهم وارحم موتاهم وتقبل شهداءهم واجعلهم يا ربي من أوليائك الصالحين الصابرين وصل اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم وأقم الصلاة.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
استقيموا تراصوا يرحمني ويرحمكم الله فتفوا shoulder to shoulder, not leave any gaps, fill in the front row if possible. Pray as if you're praying your last prayer. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والضحى والليل إذا سجى ما ودعك ربك وما قلى وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى ولسوف يعطيك ربك فترضى ألم يجدك يتيما فآوى ووجدك ضالا فهدى ووجدك عائلا فأغنى فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر وأما السائل فلا تنهر وأما بنعمة ربك فحدث. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعاديات ضبحا فالموريات قدحا فالمغيرات صبحا فأثرن به نقعا فوسطن به جمعا إن الإنسان لربه لكنود وإنه على ذلك لشهيد وإنه لحب الخير لشديد أفلا يعلم إذا بعثر ما في القبور وحصل ما في الصدور إن ربهم بهم يومئذ لخبير. الله. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.